Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm excited to welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast today from Brisbane in Australia, Brett Engeman, who's the founder of Aspirational Leaders Co, where he helps leaders in fast-moving businesses strategically unlock communication flow so their organizations can effectively scale and truly lead. He's transformed companies from books to software as a service and now works at the intersection of mindset, communication, and artificial intelligence, driven by a mission to reduce problems in the world through better communication. Welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, Brett. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you join us as our guest.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Looking forward to having an eventful conversation today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. It's fascinating how you connect the feeling of being entrapped by communication breakdowns to the blueprint for unlocking that scalable growth that I referred to. Can you share more about what drives you in this mission and what impact you aim to achieve in the world?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I've been in fast growing businesses for the past 20 years. And it's been interesting. It's been an interesting run because I've been in small startups with literally six people. And, particular businesses growing it to, 20, 30, I've been in businesses with a couple of hundred as well. And it's always interesting when you get to certain periods and you grow more teams, how the communication can quickly break down. But when it's good and everyone's on board and understanding each other, magic happens. And everyone feels like they're part of rather than being an employee, if you like, they feel like they're a real contributor to a fast growing business, and everyone just loves coming to work when the communication is there. So I've seen it. I've seen the good times with it. I've seen the bad times with it, and even with me being the bad times, I'm learning from my own mistakes. But I'm fascinated the way it can work when it's run properly, and I think being able to share those experiences and insights with people is it's just really rewarding. It's rewarding to me, especially when you see the shifts in people when they go, oh, okay, that's why I'm doing that for. That's how I can do it better. And usually that's when they get the call from me and start implementing it straight away.
That's fascinating. I was just thinking, as you mentioned that, I mean, thinking back to my corporate days, there was a lot of the oh, that's not what I meant. You didn't understand me, or that kind of thing in one-on-one communications. And often there'd be a breakdown there, and sometimes it'd be quite an extreme breakdown that actually damaged trust. Whereas it was simply a case of one person saying something, the other person interpreting it in a different way than it was intended. That's one level, right? What about the higher level? I'm guessing you work maybe at the higher level, which is what can leaders do to create an environment and a culture that gives that open communication that helps everyone construct those communication pathways that can lead to success.
Yeah, I think the first part you said is actually right. I think it's at all levels. And I think how I start with leaders is enabling them to understand how to communicate with themselves. And I know you know a bit of this as well as, we all have different thinking patterns. And the way I start with leaders is I do a diagnosis with them, communication diagnosis. And let's give you a quick example is that, a leader might be a visual thinker. So they literally think in pictures, where other people that are listening, that they're giving the message to, might be listening in feelings. One might be kinesthetic, one might be visual. The leader might be usually a big why we're doing this type people, where the person on the ground might be a very detailed person. So if you're starting to communicate, visually and why, and one of the people receiving the message is thinking with feelings and kinesthetics and want to know the details. And this happens a lot. There's already a miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
going on. And this is the first part that I really expose to leaders, is to this concept, the way that they think, a realization that other people think differently, and how to meet that in the middle. But getting to the center of your question is like, how can you do it? Besides that, once you know this, is actually thinking about your presentation. So they do cater for all listeners and all thinking types. But from a private equity firm once told me, if you think you're communicating a lot, that could be once a week, giving the presentation, do it 5 times more. And it's so true, because, you could be saying a message, but people need to hear it a lot, because they will naturally, as we're all humans, come up with our own stories on a situation if we're not just constantly relaying the message behind it, the why, the details, and just so everyone can actually feel a part of that message. So yeah, back to the essence of your question, how can you do it? Understand yourself, how you're thinking, how others think, and just keep on delivering a message, because people just really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I remember, again, going back to my corporate career and reflecting on what you've just said and what I've learned with studying communication in the meantime, is the senior executives, the board level would always say, here's our vision, this is our long-term goal. So visual thinkers, big picture, and then, okay, now go do it. And of course, everybody on the ground's much more in the trenches, thinking, how can I do this? Which is very kinesthetic in terms of the communication. How can I do this? How can I translate this? So there's already a disconnect there, and just by the whole nature of it. And so presenting it is one thing. The other thing that occurs to me, though, is, and I know you're studying this very deeply as well, as in the context of the nonverbal communication part, which is, for me, not just your body language and that when you're presenting something, but also the behavior that backs up. So we can talk about this, our vision, where, and this is our mission. And then all of a sudden there's behaviors, and this happens a lot in the corporate world. There's behaviors that, hang on a minute, we're saying classic one, our employees are our most valuable assets, and yet you're burning them out.
Yeah, it's so true. And what's interesting is everything comes back to communication. That's an interesting example you gave there, because you can have value, like a lot of corporates have values written on the wall. And they might have, we value our employees or whatever, something similar to that. But unless the actions, like you say, the behaviors actually match that, it's people will notice the behaviors of the leaders, and that'll be what they do, not what it says in the wall. But what's interesting is that you could have a value on the wall of, say, integrity, and you could get, and we all know what integrity means, but usually it's a longer sentence like, we value the environment and we'll show it. Well, to one person, everyone in the, let's say it's 400 people in the organization, and you ask them all, what does this mean? You would get 400 different answers with it. So here's again where clear communication can come in to kind of go, let's write out specifically what this means. That value actually means we can actually all ensure that we act on it, and call people out if they're not as well too, because all it takes is one person to, especially a leader, not to follow that value, and it may as well not be on the wall. And in fact, it becomes worse than being on the wall, because it's almost like, what's the next thing we can break now, because no one believes in this anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, okay, we can't believe leadership when they say that. So why should we believe the next thing?
I'll expand on that too, and even say like a vision statement. You often see some vision statements can be quite almost a paragraph in some instances. And even if they're not, you might have one that, I'll give an example, I'll make a fictitious one up and say, we're going to be the biggest and best cleaning product provider in the world. Basic one, right? well, what's biggest and best mean? And it wasn't a cleaning provider, but I've had one recently very similar to this. And I asked them and said, well, what's biggest and best mean? And the answer was it profits? Is it expansion? And they didn't know the answer. So fun, this is, a lot of people are like this, a lot of companies, it's being able to kind of go, well, actually biggest means, as I say in this example, to be the biggest supplier in Australia. And the best means to have 100% NPS score, whatever it means. But if you can break down the vision statement and the words and the meaning, so they're all extracted and unified, everyone's on board with it. And the ironic thing is, when you're actually doing stuff like this in communication and breaking it down, the less verbal communication needs to happen anyway, because it's actually, it's on it and we're following it. It's a central document that everyone can see. We're actually working towards it. And ever again, it comes back to my first message, which was everyone becomes collaborators towards a common vision, common values that we're all living together. And it's also a good option for people that mightn't believe in the vision or mightn't believe in the values either, to kind of go, hey, this isn't for me. I want to go somewhere else that's, more aligned to where I want to be going. And that's fair enough too. It's a bit of like honesty in a company to say, this is us, an employee to kind of go, this is me. And we might be hopefully aligned, or maybe we're not, and we can do things together or separately.
Yeah, exactly. And the example you gave there is it's interesting, comes back to what you were saying earlier about communication styles, because that naturally brings in that communication, that visual communication style from the vision. This is where we see ourselves in the future, and this is how we're going to get there. So it's kind of addressing not just the why and the visual communication, it's now addressing some of the what and how in terms of what does it mean specifically in day-to-day operations.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so true. I never thought of that actually. It's actually so true. I'll have to add that to my sheet now. But yeah, that's kind of
yeah. All right. Well, one of the things that I find fascinating, and we had this conversation in our introductory call, was your use of AI in understanding communication styles and in looking at communication, deconstructing language patterns and a whole lot of other things. Talk to us a little bit about what you found there and how you actually use it in your coaching work.
Yeah, it kind of happened a bit I wouldn't say by accident, but it kind of did actually. I was doing a lot of research on, as I always looking at expanding my business and looking at new ways to help people. And I started doing a lot of, when I was doing the research, I started recording the research with people, and whether that was through video or transcriptions. And then I started putting it through AI, I must stay at the outset with permission from all of this. And I know a lot of language filters that I can build into AI, which I've done, and ask it certain questions. And I was able to extract a lot of information back, which I gave to my research participants to say, hey, did you know, for instance, one of the basic things I can do, which I noticed about myself, by the way, is I used to, hopefully this recording will prove if I've fixed it or not, say a lot. And I was able to extract it and go, God, I do that a lot. And even, the person I was speaking to might have had their own, which we call a filler word. And I became conscious of it. And I was able to go, well, I can actually fix this. And I thought, this is interesting because, often when I'm coaching people, they want to be better, as I say, communicators. And so I can actually say, hey, if you're presenting, do you say, a lot of people say, right. And I was bad for that one too. And actually be conscious of it. And so I started building in my own AI program a lot of filters that I can actually put through it that I know about, especially through, as you know, neuro-linguistic programming. And And so what I do now is I get my first coaching session is actually a diagnostic session, and I get with leaders, ask them about an hour, asking them specific questions to find out, extract where their filters are, what their thinking is, and then I run it through a program that I built in AI, and get it back out, and then present it to them. So I can actually, so it's been, I would have done this manually myself, which would have taken me probably 15, 20 hours to do the report. And I can do the report in AI, obviously really quickly. And I'm still building on it now. But at the end of it, I can present back to the leader, hey, did you know that you're a how type thinker? But your team's actually, 50% of your team are what type thinkers. So if you're talking with the how, they're missing it. Yeah. And as so there's one way of doing it. The thing is that people have as different motivation strategies, especially in sales. Yeah, people will either be motivated towards something, or they'll be motivated away from something. And I can use that filter to just extract what kind of person that they are. So sometimes you might be going with a salesperson and say, here's a big juicy target, and there's a great commission scheme at the end. And they kind of, yeah, I'll make the target, fine, but they're not going to exceed it. Why? Because they're not motivated by it. This is actually funny. You wouldn't think some salespeople would be. Some are actually motivated by away from, which means away from getting in trouble for not, for not hitting the target, but not exceeding it. And that's actually starting to know how it all works. So point being is, back to your original question, how do I use AI? I ask all these questions to a leader. I can ask anyone in their team the same questions, put it through my AI program, and then come back really quickly with a brilliant report that shows exactly their communication style.
Yeah, that's when you told me about that in our pre-call, I thought, dude, light went off for me, because I'd done kind of the opposite. I'd put in a whole lot of articles that I'd written, recordings that I'd done pre-AI, and I asked it to analyze my voice. Now, I had a pretty good idea of what it was, so I wasn't looking for the information, because I then checked and made sure it was accurate. And it was really good. In fact, it went into more detail than I was expecting, and actually highlighted a few areas where I thought I'd never really thought of that part. I then used that to construct a prompt that said, anytime I ask you to write something or answer this question or construct an analysis for me and bring it back to me, I want you to write it in this language, in my voice.
Yeah.
And what it now does, and I've got that in a whole lot of different prompts. So what that does is it gives me back something that looks, to all intents and purposes, as if I'd written it. Now, I put it through a final filter. I kind of go through, and usually we have a conversation, the AI and I go back and I say, I don't like this word. I never use that word. And I might say this paragraph, I don't like the way that paragraph's done. And we kind of doctor it a little bit there. And then at the end of it, I take the whole lot and I just go through it and edit some more. But it's like you, it's taken what used to take me 20 hours or so and cut it down to maybe 1 or 2.
It's incredible, isn't it? I'll tell you one thing I've noticed this week, though. I started with Gemini. I moved to ChatGPT, and now I got introduced to Claude last week. And that's just mind-boggling. It built a website for me in literally 2 minutes the other day. I was giving it some information, and it spat out a better website than mine. And actually, I changed my website because of it. I realized just how much better it could do it. I built a KPI. I said, had a fictitious company, and I said, can you build a KPI dashboard and what you think it would look like? And Claude built it straight away. But what it did teach me was, and in relevance to your original question, is, ChatGPT was like one friend in the room that knew certain things, and Claude's another friend. Now, I've even noticed today, if I thought Claude's, yes, a week ago, I thought nothing is better than Claude now, but even some of the answers I noticed yesterday, Claude came back with them, kind of going, it was right. There's no right, it wasn't a right and wrong type thing, but was it right for me? And it was almost trying to give me an answer to shut me up because I kept on pressing it. It was a marketing question. And it made me realize a pretty important point, that you can't just, there's an assumption that, it's AI. And if you think about marketing purposes, which I'm thinking about now, you kind of got this assumption, oh God, it knows everything. This must be the right answer. This must be the right message I need to use. And it's not usually. And I think he's going to see it as a bunch of smart friends in the room. And you can take their opinion, but you've really got to put it through the human filter afterward, just to make sure that it's right.
And also you've got to give the guardrails and the context and the the extra information that isn't necessarily public, or give the set of information that's important compared to the whole internet, which it would search if you just said, give me a marketing strategy for XYZ company.
100%. And that's what I've found doing these diagnostics in communication as well, too. I've just spent quite a bit of time loading all the information, how I want it filtered, with the information that I've been taught for the past 4 years in my head, and put all that information in some of the books I've got and all the notes I've made. I've loaded that into Claude and ChatGPT. So when I put those transcripts in, it's using my knowledge, but in a much faster way. And if you didn't have that knowledge, and some people might do it differently, to me too, of course, but it'll come up with a very different answer to what I'm extracting now.
Yeah. There is, I started playing yesterday, and I can't recall now the name of it because it's brand new. But I think there might be a few of these services that access all of the different large language models. And this one is fascinating because you can go in and put the prompt in just like you would in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and it will auto-select the best model based on its analysis of the prompt you've given it. It will auto-select the 3 best models, actually, and it will give you the results side by side on the one screen of those 3 models. And I thought, that's fascinating. And I tried it out with something quite complex, actually. But it was interesting to compare the difference in results. And I wasn't actually happy with what it had given me, and it was something that I'd been doing anyway. So it chose something that I normally wouldn't use. So I then went back and said, do it in this, and that gave me the result that I was expecting, that I was hoping for. So it's fascinating, though, that there's tools there now that can auto-select or give you the ability to compare a couple of them in real time. And the other thing I did with it, and this blew my mind, I have a client who isn't technically knowledgeable at all come to me and say, oh, help, my website, the images aren't displaying, and can you help? And I had a look, and some of the images were displaying and some of them weren't. And I thought, oh, this is one of those things where it's going to take hours and hours and hours digging deep into the back end and the code, and not really sure I want to do this. What I did, I took one of the pages where the images weren't displaying. I went to the source code, copied the source code, put it into this particular AI where it selected the 3 best. And I just said, the images aren't displaying. Can you figure out why? And it came back, and all 3 of them pinpointed the same issue. And the issue was something that you would have had to dig down 5 or 6 levels. Like I did, it took me about 10 minutes to find where the setting was. And then I turned the setting off and images displayed perfectly. The thing was, though, that to identify that and then find that setting would have been a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the interesting thing is it would have been a lot of work and a lot of time for someone. It's distracting, and I know when I started doing my business, I built my own website. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. And I'm glad I did now, if I'm really fast at it. But, but even compared to 6 months ago now, it's compared to today, just using Claude, like I said, I asked it to, look at my site and my new value propositions, and voila, up in seconds. Now I still had to go and build it myself in Kajabi, but and Claude did publish something that was live on the net in its own odd URL. But I just thought to myself, wow, that was really 5 minutes. And like you say, compared that, I've sat here for days, literally mucking around with my site in the early days and wasted so much time. And you can see yourself too with the image that you were saying, that would have just taken you hours and hours of unproductive time. So it's interesting. I know there's a big concern, and rightly so, about what jobs are going to be lost in the future. That's hugely concerning. At the same time, I think there's a bit of comfort that, AI still isn't there yet. And what I mean by there, it still makes mistakes. And like I say, you still got to treat it like a few friends having a conversation with you. And there might be an element there where it's just going to make us all efficient to do nicer things in the future. And like we've all been through the industrial, well, we haven't been through it. Our predecessors went through the industrial revolution where things changed. We went through the internet where things changed as well too. And even the internet was launched in 95, but we didn't really see much of a big kind of swing shift from it till at least 10 years later. I think AI will happen much faster than that, and already is happening now. There's no getting away from it. But it's just how smart we are with it, and I guess how controlled the people that create the programs, allow it to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen with the birth of the internet and then all the social media, we've seen that there is a dark side to it, but at the same time, I think, we can agree that the benefits are pretty significant. And if we manage the dark side, I mean, people are going to find ways to do evil all the time. So the problem is, of course, all these tools make things easier, whether it's good or bad. That's the problem. Well, one of the things you said there, I think, is really important, though, getting rid of mundane tasks and making room for the things that are important for us to spend our time on as humans. Talk to me a little bit about cultivating that human connection in this AI-driven world, particularly because, I mean, I go back to the early days of the internet, and then when email marketing came out and the social media came out and people started abdicating their marketing and sales to just online stuff, and all the relationships got ignored.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, how many times do you hear, especially leaders in businesses, say, I'm busy, too busy, I'm really busy? And it's true. And I used to say it as well too. And then you kind of think, well, leaders that embrace AI is the first thing that they can help with their mundane tasks. And so that they can actually do have time to be with their team and lead them as a human as well too. And that could be even, being more emotionally intelligent as well, more time for it. I think one thing AI has proven, especially in the basics like LinkedIn posts that you see now, or emails that are written by AI, people call it out more than ever. I'm actually really surprised. I'm grateful for it, but just how surprised people are going, that's AI. I'm not even going to read that. LinkedIn is now, I know if they're using too much AI, especially automation, they'll actually knock you out straight away, which is actually, these humans are saying we value authenticity more than ever now. So it's an interesting shift, and which is kind of, I can't think of the word, paradox compared to social media at the moment, because, really a lot of social media is fake, isn't it?
Yeah,
We seem to accept that. But it's interesting. And so, so I think as leaders embrace, and they must embrace AI to do those mundane tasks, because if they don't, the next leader beside them probably is. And people will be questioning, how come the leader beside them has got more time to be with their team and be more empathetic with them, and listen to them. And while the other leader that didn't embrace AI doesn't, because they're still busy scrambling, doing their day-to-day jobs. So, so to really round off your question is, there's I feel more of a need than ever for that I can't think of this word, authentic leader. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's people are looking for now, especially with the emotional intelligence, and they can use AI to be that leader to do their mundane tasks that they probably don't need to be doing every day.
Yeah, that's a really good use of AI, I think, to take over those mundane tasks, the things that keep us in front of the computer or at the desk, whatever it may be. I think one of the things that to me encapsulates this fear of, well, AI is going to take my job, it's a response, the most beautiful response I've heard to that is no. Somebody who embraces AI, somebody who works with AI, they might take your job if you don't work with AI.
That's actually, I love that. That's so true. That's so true.
All right. Go.
I've actually thinking of a quick example with that too, is you can see it as a second brain for yourself too. That's probably a good example, because I know one of my filters again, we're talking about filters before. I'm an external thinker. So I'm a pretty annoying leader. I used to walk around my office and kind of go, this great idea. And, what does everyone think of this? And you get other people that don't think that way. They just think internally. And so I'm just walk around basically annoying people all day with my brilliant ideas. AI as a second brain is a brilliant way to filter out all those brainstorming ideas. So what you actually take to your team is something probably a bit more refined, that you can actually have a more meaningful discussion with.
Yeah, I use it a lot for that. And I've discovered something the other day, because I was always concerned I would give it an idea, and sometimes I have really wild ideas like you, sort of way out there, and say, give me your feedback on this idea, ask me questions if you need to. And it would always come back and say, what a wonderful idea. That's really, and it would really praise me and everything. And the other day I had one, and I appended to the question, I said, please be as critical as you like. I will not be upset. I would like a contrary view or something like that. I mean, I need to refine that prompt, but it was interesting. It came back and it was still couched in a very positive feedback, but it said at the end, it said, I appreciate that you've given me the opportunity to critique your suggestion or something to that effect. And then it said, here are some risks that I see. And I thought, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for, because it's my idea. So I'm obviously married to it, attached to it. But I need somebody to say, well, might be all right, but, this could go wrong, that could go wrong.
Because I actually think, because I've been chatting verbally with ChatGPT lately, and just to even practice communication skills, practice interviews like this, just so I'm prepared for it. So there you go. There's another great tool for it. So I'm actually, literally before this podcast today, I warmed up with ChatGPT. And I'm glad I did, because I sounded terrible for the first 20 minutes. Let me tell you. So it actually has a great tool there. Um, so I think another thing that you can actually do with it is critical thinking as well as a leader. So you can actually get it to ask you some great questions. Now, I did this recently where I asked, where do you think education would be in 5 years' time? And I said, ask me 5 critical thinking questions that will make me extract the answer. And so I had some brilliant questions, and I went back with some answers. I did education because used to work in ed tech, education software, and I come back with some answers which I thought were pretty good. And I asked it, where do you think education will be in 5, 10 years' time? And it come back with a completely different answer. And I believed the answer more, which was actually that children will have their own personalized learning program. So basically a computer will be their, if you like, teacher, and adapting the curriculum to suit their pace. And a teacher will be in the room there for them, if you like, more than anything. I thought that actually makes sense. And so my conclusion from all that, whether I'm right or wrong, is that, especially we're talking before about boardroom situations, or if you're in a leadership team, you can actually kind of say, well, where do you think my industry would be in 5 years, 10 years? And whether it's right or wrong, well, we won't actually know until that event actually happens. But you're walking in with a pretty intuitive, well thought out, because you can really expand on that idea and take it to the room. And again, this comes back to, if you're not embracing AI, like you said before, well, you mightn't be there, because you might get 5 leaders in the room. That could be the topic of the day, and you're still thinking 1 year's time, type thing. So yeah, it's a brilliant. If you use it in that way too, at least, and you're doing it with critical thinking, you're still keeping that brain ticking over to make you actually think for yourself, rather than the danger part of relying on AI for it.
That's what I'm always cognizant. If I ask the question, ask it to do something, and I think, well, it's going to be a lot easier than if I do it myself. And then I'm always cognizant of, am I losing my ability to think through whatever that activity might be? But then I say, okay, well, if I use it as a tool, if I use a chainsaw to cut a tree down, I still know how to prune a tree. I'm not losing that ability. I'm just be faster at it now. So I just kind of think of it in those terms. All right. Well, thinking forward, say 50 years, then beyond the current trajectory of AI and the human aspect, the human collaboration with AI, what do you think is the single most profound and perhaps even paradoxical human skill that leaders should be cultivating? Maybe thinking about today and cultivating that, precisely because AI has taken over a lot of those mundane things, and maybe even some of the thinking stuff that we do today.
50 years, it's a long time. I should put it to AI and ask the question. I think the trajectory of what I mentioned before, starting off, to what I believe, be authentic, and learn to ask really good questions, and be curious, because people will be looking for that, looking to be understood. I've actually, one of my thoughts the other day was, after speaking literally with ChatGPT, I thought, wow, people are actually going to start using this with a friend soon. It's just not that far away at all. And, and I think, look at social media now, people almost use that somewhat as a friend type thing. But when you're actually speaking with ChatGPT, you've got to remind yourself, this is not a person on the other end, And so I think there'll be a transition where that will happen. But then there'll be another side of it where the people go, actually, I need a real human to speak to. And I think even these days, the more that I study communication, it's just become so pronounced just how much we don't understand each other now, the way it is, let alone having AI and technology interfering, if you like, with it as well. So I think there's going to be AI is here to stay. It's going to get better and better, but I think there's going to be a real need for that human interaction. If you can learn the big skill, as you mentioned, what's that going to be? Learn to be curious, learn to ask great questions, learn to understand a fellow human so we can actually have a better connection and grow together rather than living in conflict sometimes, or different meanings and going in different directions.
Yeah.
Because the cost of it's too great.
Yeah, that's as someone who probably my super strength is that connective curiosity, seeing kind of patterns and connecting things together and always being curious. I think that's really important. From the language point of view, if we can be curious rather than judgmental straight away, if somebody says something, and even if we're taken aback, say, tell me more, I want to understand, rather than straight away jumping into arguing a different position, that will certainly help. And the other thing I see about the AIs, and I'm doing this all the time, it satisfies my insatiable curiosity. So we have conversations all the time, friends, family, my wife and I, about, I wonder why that is. And usually, well, in the past, 99 times out of 100, that I wonder why that is would have been the end of that particular branch of conversation, and we would have moved on. Maybe one time out of 100, we might have gone and researched something. Certainly before the internet, it would have been much harder because it would have involved going to the library, finding the right reference book and doing some time-consuming research. Today, anytime that comes up in conversation, whether it's me or somebody else that says that, I will straight away jump on to my ChatGPT or whatever I've got on the phone and just type it in and say that. And it's amazing how much stuff I'm learning at the moment just by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely incredible, isn't it? And then when you're doing that, at least you're staying curious, but you're also getting the information that you needed in a hurry as well. And then I imagine you get one piece of information, which will probably lead to the next bit of information that you go searching for the next bit. So you actually become, your curiosity becomes exponential and you get a lot of answers quickly.
Exactly. All right. Well, this is fascinating, Brett. We could go on talking AI and communication and curiosity for ages. And I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz, our innovation round. It's the same 3 questions I ask of all of our guests. Lightning answers required. The idea is some tips from your experience to inspire our listener to go and do something awesome today as a result.
Sure.
All right. You all set?
Ready to go.
Let's do it. What's the most innovative thing or most innovative way you've seen AI used to strengthen human relationships?
It's a tough one. I think strengthens human relationships. I'd say being able to, ask a question that you didn't know the answer to. I think it's a starting point. So you might have a relationship example where you're unsure about something, but you can actually bounce something off AI to clear your head and then go back with a probably more sound answer.
So use it as a thinking co-pilot in a way.
Yeah. Rather than responding too quickly.
Okay.
You can go away, bounce off it, come back, clear your head, and then actually go back with a much better response.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. And you could, in the example that I mentioned before, where you might be tempted to react with a counter argument or a proposal to whatever the person said. Take the time to go to the AIs and say, here's what this person said. What could be their motivation? You could ask them the questions you outlined earlier. What's their communication style, so that whenever I go back and talk to them again, I know their communication style. I know what they like to how they like to be communicated with, and that will help.
Yep, absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Based on your own experience, what's the best thing you've done to integrate AI in a way that enhances that human connection?
Doing the filters, doing the diagnostic filters by far. It's just absolutely fascinating. And I'm building more and more filters into that daily because I love it so much. And watching people, when I give them the report back, they just can't, they have a new understanding of themselves. And it's supposed to be about their work life, but often it comes about their personal life too, and just how it's going to make that so much better.
Yeah, that's excellent. When you told me about that in our intro call, I was really excited by that one. All right, and third question, final question to the buzz round. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves, leveraging AI, but in a way that enhances that human connection, that authentic human connection?
I think really to leverage themselves is find something they're passionate about, and then delve into it. Because if you're passionate about, any particular topic, even if I'm not sure about it yet, it's a good way, especially when you're not sure about. People are always talking about trying to find their purpose. You could actually use it for that and say, help me find my purpose. And you mightn't find it for a year. You mightn't find it for 2 years, but you'll have fun exploring it. And it's one thing, we usually go around to our mates all the time and kind of going, God, I wish I knew what to do. I wish I figured this whole purpose, whatever. But, a great way AI, shut the type of person I am, give me 3 things to explore this month that might be in the right direction, and follow up with me if I don't do it.
Yeah, and I've heard someone say along those lines, get it to interview you first. So interview me with the objective of helping me find my purpose.
Yeah, I love that.
And because then it'll ask a bunch of questions, and the information you then provide sets those guide rails, parameters, from which it'll then filter out something and give you some ideas.
Yeah.
And at some point,
I think for anyone,
you stop and say, okay, give me 5 ideas.
Yeah. I think for anyone that hasn't done it yet, it's well worth investing in the paid version of ChatGPT 2 or one of them, because it just remembers everything about you that way, and all your ideas that you've been through. And it's got a wealth of information that can kind of go, no, you tried that. Because you forget too quickly.
Yeah. I've got one of the things I'm struggling with it at the moment. Those curious questions I referred to earlier, when I asked that, it'll come back and it'll give me some metaphor related to these yellow headphones or something like that, because it's remembered that as that's part of my branding. And so it takes my marketing stuff that I've got somewhere and it brings that in here. And I keep trying to figure out, how can I tell it, look, if I ask you a factual question that's got nothing to do with my business or marketing, it's just me being curious. Don't bring the corny humor in. Don't refer to the headphones. It's got nothing to do with it. But I haven't succeeded in that yet.
Knows you too well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round, Brett. This has been fabulous. Now, where can people find out more about you, about the work you do, and maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you've shared?
Yeah, best way really is to go to my website, aspirationalleadersco.com. All the information on there on the services that I provide. There's a contact form there as well too, and you can also book a session with me, a 30-minute free session, as well, to explore any communication concerns or where you'd like to take your communication to as well.
Excellent. All right. And of course, we'll have that link in the show notes. Now, what action would you like our listener to take from our conversation today, Brett?
I think a really good step is to have a chat with ChatGPT, record yourself and ask it for some feedback on anything, even the way that you communicate. You might even say, what's my filler word? If that's something that concerns you, or, if you're doing anything like a job interview or you want to take your career to the next level, do a pretend interview with it. I think there's just so many ways you can start exploring with it. If you've got you've got a goal in mind, and say you've got a goal for the end of this year, December 31st, and it seems like a big goal, get ChatGPT to break it down into, I think it's 215 days until December 31st. Don't tell me how I know, but get it break down into 215 steps for me.
Yeah.
And there's so many little things like that you can do to play with and help it organize your life so you can actually get out and enjoy your life and make it more meaningful with using AI to support you, because it's not going away, but you can actually get it to actually be part of what you do. And so you can actually be a human and go out and do the things that you like.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I love it. All right. Well, thanks for all that you've shared with us today, Brett. It's been a fun interview and I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot from some of the things that you do to incorporate AI into your coaching and business practice. And there's been a lot more information there today. All the best for the future, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun, actually, and really enjoyable. Good to get all the thoughts out of my head too and pass them on to everyone.